Somewhere above the orbit of a planet humans had never heard of, a council of 7 alien species was about to make the biggest mistake in galactic history. And they didn't even know it yet. The Valkyrie testing facility had hosted first contact evaluations for over 300 species. Every single one had been measured, weighed, and filed into the galactic hierarchy within a single day. The process was simple. Pick one baseline individual, run them through the standard evaluation suite, and use the results to decide how much military investment a new species was worth. For humanity, the Galactic Council had been almost insultingly casual about their selection criteria. No soldiers, no scientists, no athletes. They wanted someone ordinary, proof that first contact protocols could handle the dullest possible specimen a species could offer. They chose Maya Patel, 26 years old, barista at a coffee shop called A Grind on the corner of 5th and Lincoln. No military background, no advanced degrees. Her resume listed excellent multitasking and customer service excellence as her primary skills. To the council selection algorithm, she was about as unremarkable as a human could get. "She makes coffee," said Administrator Threll, flipping through Maya's file with her mantis-like fingers. "This is a specimen Earth's government submitted?" "Correct," replied his assistant, a small blue creature named Oxa, whose 4 eyes blinked independently. They said she was just a normal person, nothing special. Their exact words. Threll made a clicking sound that, on his homeworld, indicated mild amusement. Good. Then this will be quick. Maya herself had been given almost no explanation. One day she was steaming oat milk for a regular customer named Gary, and the next she was standing in a beam of light that made her hair float weightlessly, blinking up at creatures that looked like they'd walked off the cover of a pulp sci-fi novel. She said, looking around a chromin glass testing chamber. "Is this about the Yelp review? Because I swear that 1-star rating was from a guy who wanted oat milk and an espresso shot. And that's just not how espresso works." "You are Maya Patel," Threll interrupted, his translator device flattening his voice into something eerily calm. "Selected representative of the species Homo sapiens. You will undergo a series of evaluations to determine baseline human capability." Maya blinked. "Baseline? Like, am I being tested? Is this a job interview? Because I have to say, the lighting in here is not great for a first impression." The council exchanged glances. Threll's assistant made a note. Subject displays unusual calm in face of interspecies first contact. Possible sign of low cognitive threat assessment. They had no idea. The first test was simple, a reflex and reaction time assessment, identical to the one given to elite warriors from the Dranic Empire, a species renowned across 3 star systems for producing the fastest combat reflexes ever recorded. Drones would launch from 6 directions at random intervals. The subject needed to deflect, dodge, or neutralize them using a basic stun baton. Maya was handed the baton. It looked to her exactly like the wand things from laser tag, a game she played roughly 40 times during her college years for birthday parties and team-building events nobody actually wanted to attend. "So I just hit the flying things?" she asked. "Correct," said Oxa, monitoring from behind reinforced glass. Most candidates from advanced species achieve a hit rate of approximately 60 to 70% in their first attempt. "Cool," said Maya. "Can I listen to music while I do it? I work better with music." Nobody answered, mostly because nobody knew what to say to that. The drones launched. What happened next would be replayed, frame by frame, in council chambers across 9 star systems for the next several months. Maya didn't dodge the drones one at a time. She moved like she was closing out a Saturday morning rush at the grind, eyes flicking between 4 things at once, body shifting fluidly between tasks, baton snapping out in short, economical arcs that intercepted each drone microseconds before impact. She wasn't even looking directly at most of them. She caught one drone with a behind-the-back swing while simultaneously stepping to avoid another. The same kind of unconscious spatial awareness she used every single day to avoid spilling scalding espresso on customers while taking orders, calling out names, restocking syrups, and fielding complaints about her music choice. All at once, for 8 hours straight, 5 days a week. By the time the drones retreated, all 6 had been disabled. Total time, 4.7 seconds. Dranic record, 11.3 seconds, with a 71% hit rate, not 100%. In the observation room, Administrator Threll's four hands had gone very still. "Run again," he said. They ran it again. Same result. They added 8 more drones. Same result, just slightly longer. They removed the warning lights that signaled when a drone was about to launch. Maya's success rate didn't change. "I don't get it," Maya said afterward, slightly out of breath but grinning. "Is this like a fitness test for a new job? Because I gotta say, I'm definitely available between the rent increase, my landlord's creative definition of minor repairs. I could use the extra income." Nobody on the council had an answer for her. They were too busy staring at the numbers on the screen. Numbers that simply should not have been possible for an unmodified, unenhanced biological specimen with 0 combat training. "This must be an anomaly," Threll said finally, trying to steady his own translated voice. "Proceed to the obstacle course." He had no idea that anomaly was about to become a very generous word. The obstacle course had been designed to simulate hostile terrain across a dozen different planetary environments. Zero-gravity sections, magnetic floor panels at randomly reverse polarity, narrow beams suspended over a pit line with thankfully non-lethal but extremely uncomfortable electroshock plating, and a final sprint through a corridor that randomly generated walls in your path. The current galactic record, set by a Yendri elite scout, a species literally evolved on a high-gravity world with reinforced skeletal density specifically suited for this kind of obstacle navigation, stood at 58 seconds. Maya looked at the course, looked at the obstacle layout map, and shrugged. This is basically just doing inventory in the back stockroom during a Saturday rush. Except the floor isn't on fire, she muttered to herself. "Okay, let's go." She cleared it in 19 seconds. She did it again, just to see if she could shave off more time, and got it down to 15. By the third attempt, Administrator Threll had stopped speaking entirely, and Oxa had quietly begun drafting an emergency communication to the full Galactic Council, the kind reserved for genuine existential threat scenarios. What none of them yet realized was that this was only the beginning, because while Maya breezed through every physical and mental challenge they could throw at her with the casual ease of someone juggling orders during the morning rush, the real shockwave hadn't even started yet. They were about to ask Earth for a second test subject, and Earth was about to send Maya's grandmother. What a thing that terrified an entire galaxy wasn't a weapon, an army, or a secret superweapon, but a 26-year-old barista who thought she was just doing a slightly weird job interview. After the obstacle course collapsed every existing physical record in the Council's database, Administrator Threll requested an emergency recess. He needed time to think, time to recalibrate, and frankly, time to sit somewhere quiet and process the fact that every assumption his species held about biological hierarchy in the galaxy had just been set on fire by a woman who kept asking if there was a vending machine nearby. She has requested, Oxa reported carefully, something called a snack break. She says she gets hangry and that her test scores might tank without one. Threll's mandibles clicked rapidly, his species equivalent of a long, tired sigh. Give her whatever she wants. I don't care if it's gold-pressed latinum. I need this woman calm and fed before the puzzle trials. The puzzle trials were the Council's pride and joy, a battery of logic, spatial reasoning, and pattern recognition challenges originally developed by the Velcari themselves, a species whose entire civilization was built around intellectual achievement. The current galactic record holder was a Velcari archivist named Sorrent, who had solved a full battery, 14 separate challenges of escalating difficulty, in 2 hours and 11 minutes, a result considered a borderline miracle even among his own brilliant species. Maya was handed a tablet with the first puzzle, a multidimensional logic grid that required tracking 17 variables simultaneously across 4 shifting rule sets. She looked at it the way she looked at a register screen during a holiday rush when 3 customers were shouting different modified orders at her at once. The espresso machine was beeping a low-water warning, and a new hire was crying in the back about misreading a recipe. "Oh, this is just like doing closing inventory, while 3 people argue about whether decaf actually has caffeine in it," she said, already tapping through variables. She finished the first puzzle in 4 minutes. The Velcari record was 31. By puzzle 6, a 3-dimensional resource allocation problem, that required balancing competing constraints under a strict time limit, a puzzle that had once made an entire delegation of Valkyrian mathematicians request a recess. Maya was humming a pop song under her breath and absent-mindedly drumming her fingers on the table between calculations. This is basically just scheduling shifts for 6 baristas during finals week when half of them want time off, and the espresso machine's been overheating, she muttered. Okay, so if Priya works Tuesday through Thursday and Diego can't close because of his night class... She finished the entire 14-puzzle battery, the one that took the galaxy's brightest archivist over 2 hours, in 26 minutes. In the observation chamber, several council members had begun speaking over each other in a chaotic mix of languages, none of which the translation devices could fully untangle into coherent policy. Thrill watched the timer freeze at 26:14 and felt something he hadn't felt in decades of diplomatic service. Genuine, bone-deep fear. She did this, he said slowly, without any visible effort, without training, without enhancement. This is supposed to be their average citizen. Sir, Oxa said quietly, I don't think we should test the combat simulations next. Why not? Because if this is what average looks like, I am afraid to learn what happens when she actually tries. They tested the combat simulations anyway, because the Council's evaluation protocol didn't have a clause for, please stop, we're scared. The combat simulation arena was state-of-the-art, an AI combat instructor named Unit, 7 that had been trained on millions of hours of footage from 40 different species martial traditions, capable of adapting its fighting style in real time to counter any opponent. Unit 7 had a perfect win record against every biological species it had ever faced, including several elite Dranic warriors who'd come in specifically to test their skills against galactic-grade artificial combat intelligence. Maya stepped into the arena wearing the lightweight padded suit they'd given her, looking distinctly unimpressed by the menacing 8-foot robotic combat instructor currently sizing her up with glowing red optical sensors. So, do I just hit it? Is there a rule book? Unit 7 will adapt its tactics to your fighting style, Oxa explained over the intercom. There are no formal rules beyond non-lethal force parameters. Got it, Maya said. This is basically just the time Dave from the loading dock got handsy after one too many free refills, and I had to walk him out without spilling the tray of drinks I was carrying. Different stakes, I guess, but same energy. Unit 7 lunged first, a blindingly fast diagonal strike calibrated to overwhelm even augmented combatants. Maya stepped sideways, not a dramatic dodge, just a small, efficient shift in her weight, the same kind of micro-adjustment she made 100 times a shift to avoid colliding with co-workers while carrying scalding drinks through a packed cafe, and the strike whistled past her shoulder by inches. What followed wasn't a fight, so much as a demonstration. Unit 7 escalated through its combat library, grappling sequences, weapon-based attacks, even an emergency-only lethal force-adjacent maneuver reserved for the most dangerous test subjects. Maya met each one with the same calm, almost bored efficiency, redirecting momentum, sidestepping strikes, and occasionally, almost apologetically, tapping the AI's joints in ways that made its limbs lock up entirely. You're overcommitting on your right side, she told the robot at one point, genuinely trying to be helpful. Every time you go for that big swing, you leave your hip totally open. I learned that the hard way dealing with a regular who used to try to grab the tip jar. The council watched in stunned silence as Maya casually disassembled their most advanced combat AI's confidence. If a machine could be said to have confidence, point by point, correction by correction, like a patient barista training a slow new hire. Final result. Unit 7's win streak, undefeated against every species tested before, ended at 0 wins, 0 draws, and one extremely thorough critique of his footwork. Thrill sat in silence for a long moment after the simulation ended, staring at the data feed. She is 26 years old, he finally said. She has no training. She makes coffee for a living. And she just outfought the single most advanced combat intelligence in our possession, while giving it pointers. What do we do? Oxa asked, her 4 eyes wide with something close to panic. Thrill was quiet for a long moment. We request a second human specimen, he said. Someone even more average than Maya Patel. We need a true baseline, a control group. There must be an explanation, some statistical fluke, Some hidden military program. Axa hesitated. And if Earth sends someone worse? Then we will finally understand humanity's true ceiling, Threll said. He had no idea there was no ceiling at all. Earth's government, upon receiving a request for a less exceptional specimen for controlled testing, conferred for exactly 11 minutes before reaching a unanimous decision. They sent Maya's grandmother. What could possibly be scarier to an entire galaxy than a barista who just demolished their best combat AI? The answer arrived in a flowered cardigan, complaining about the temperature on the shuttle. Nirmala Patel, known to absolutely everyone, including several government officials who'd had the misfortune of meeting her, as Nana, was 71 years old, 5'2" on a good day, and walked with slight limp she attributed to the knee without ever specifying which knee or what exactly had happened to it. When the request came through official channels for a control specimen, ideally of lower physical capability than the previous test subject, the United Nations liaison team had exactly one conversation about it. Who do we send? Maya's grandmother just texted asking if she could go, since Maya mentioned the aliens seemed nice but a little dramatic. Send her. Nobody on Earth's side fully grasped what they were about to do to the Galactic Council's collective nervous system. Nana Patel had survived the partition of India as a child, immigrated to a new country with 2 suitcases and $40, raised 4 children largely on her own after being widowed at 38, worked retail for 2 full decades, including 11 consecutive Black Friday shifts at a department store, learned 3 languages out of pure necessity, and had once talked down an armed robber at her sari shop by offering him tea and politely explaining that robbing a 60-year-old woman was, frankly, beneath him. He left without the register money and, according to Nana, with better manners than he came in with. She arrived at the Valkyrie testing facility in the same beam of light that had taken Maya, wearing a cardigan over a salwar kameez, a shawl draped over one arm, and an expression profound unimpressedness. "It's very cold in here," she announced to the assembled council before anyone could speak. "Is there a thermostat?" "You people don't have a thermostat." Administrator Threll, still mentally recovering from the previous week's events, found himself oddly relieved that the specimen at least looked appropriately fragile. Elderly, slightly stooped, slow, careful steps. This, surely, would be the baseline they needed. "Greetings," Threll said, trying to sound diplomatic rather than desperate. "You are Nirmala Patel, grandmother of the previous test subject?" "Nana," she corrected. "Everyone calls me Nana. Even people I just met 5 minutes ago, apparently, because nobody respects names anymore. Where's my granddaughter? Is she eating properly? She works too much, that girl." "Maya is resting," Axa offered, after completing several evaluations. "Good. She doesn't sleep enough. I keep telling her, no good coffee shop job is worth your health. But does she listen?" "No." Threll cleared his throat, eager to begin before this conversation veered further from his control. "We would like you to undergo a similar series of evaluations. We understand you may have some physical limitations, given your age." Nana's eyebrows rose slightly. "Physical limitations," she repeated. "Young man, I raised 4 children, ran a shop for 20 years, and survived a partition that you cannot even imagine. What limitations are you referring to?" "We were told you have arthritis," Axa said carefully, consulting a file. "I do have arthritis," Nana said, flexing one hand with a slight wince. "In my left knee and a little in my fingers when it's cold, which, as I mentioned, it is, in here, very cold." "We will adjust the temperature," Threll said quickly. "Shall we begin with the reflex evaluation?" The reflex test arena had been recalibrated after Maya's results. The drone speed increased by another 40% to account for whatever genetic anomaly the council suspected might run in the family. Surely, they reasoned, a 71-year-old woman with a bad knee would establish a reasonable lower bound. Nana looked at the offered stun baton with deep skepticism. "This is a toy from the testing room? It looks cheap. Where I'm from, we made better toys out of bottle caps and string." "It's a precision instrument," Axa said. "Are you ready to begin?" "One moment." Nana adjusted her shawl, rolled her shoulders once, and cracked her neck with a sound that made Threll's mandibles twitch involuntarily. "Okay, go ahead." But if my knee acts up, I am stopping, and you will give me a chair and a cup of chai. Real chai, not whatever stomach acid you people probably call tea here. The drones launched. What the council observed next would later be described, in formal council records, using the phrase an unprecedented violation of expected biomechanical limitations for a specimen of advanced chronological age. Nana didn't move like Maya had. Maya's movements had been quick, almost playful, full of unconscious efficiency born from years of multitasking chaos. Nana's movements were different, economical in an almost terrifying way, like a woman who had calculated the absolute minimum motion required to solve a problem and refused to waste a single additional joule of energy on anything more. She caught the first drone with 2 fingers, almost lazily, redirecting its momentum into the second drone with the same motion. The third and fourth she handled with the kind of casual precision a person uses to swat a fly while reading the newspaper. The fifth drone she simply let collide with her shawl, which she'd somehow positioned to deflect it harmlessly to the floor without lifting a finger. Total time, 3.1 seconds. Faster than Maya. Faster than anything in the Council's recorded history, by a margin so large that 2 separate analysts initially assumed the sensor equipment had malfunctioned. My knee is fine, Nana announced, sounding almost disappointed. Is that all? I expected something more challenging, given how cold you keep this place. Threll's voice, when he finally found it, came out strained even through the translator. Run the diagnostic again. Confirm sensor accuracy. They confirmed it 3 times. The result never changed. This is impossible, murmured a council member from the Valkyrie delegation, a being whose entire species prided themselves on data integrity above all else. She is elderly. She has a bad knee. This cannot be a fair baseline of human capability. There must be some enhancement we're not detecting. Oxa scanned Nana with every available device. No implants. No augmentation. No unusual biochemistry beyond standard markers for advanced age, mild osteoarthritis, and, oddly, unusually low cortisol levels for someone undergoing an unprecedented first contact evaluation in an alien testing facility. She is not nervous, Oxa reported, baffled. Her stress indicators are lower than they were when she arrived. She appears to be enjoying herself. Of course I'm enjoying myself, Nana said, having apparently overheard despite the device not being designed for her to hear it. This is the most exciting thing that has happened to me since my granddaughter's engagement fell through, and I had to deal with the caterer myself. Now, what's next? And somebody please find me that chai. I asked nicely. Threll stared at the readings on his screen, then at the small, calm woman in the flowered cardigan who had just obliterated every reflex record in galactic history without disturbing a single hair. He had requested a baseline. What he was getting with mounting and horrifying clarity was proof that there was no baseline at all. Only an entire species that had been quietly terrified without anyone, including themselves, fully realizing it. Proceed, he said weakly, to the obstacle course. He was not prepared for what came next. Would you be terrified of an opponent who described an obstacle course designed by a galactic superpower as easier than carrying groceries up 4 flights of stairs because the elevator's broken again? Because that's exactly what the Council was about to face. The obstacle course had already been broken once by Maya. Its difficulty quietly increased afterward by a panicked engineering team who assumed, reasonably they thought, that no one could possibly top a 19-second clear time, let alone the 15-second improvement she'd managed on her 3rd attempt. Nana Patel surveyed the layout, zero-gravity sections, reversing magnetic floor panels, the electroshock pit, and the randomly generated wall corridor at the end. This is silly, she said. Why would anyone build floors that don't know if they're up or down? In my day, we just had stairs, and if the stairs were bad, you complained to the landlord and nothing happened, and you climbed the bad stairs anyway. Are you ready to begin? Oxa asked, hovering nearby with a readout device. One moment. Nana adjusted her shawl again, tucking it more securely around her shoulders. It's drafty in here. Also, I should mention, I get a little dizzy with the upside-down floors. I had vertigo once, very bad, after a bus ride in the mountains back home. So, if I seem slow at first, that is why, not because there's anything wrong with me. She was not slow. The zero-gravity section, designed to disorient even trained pilots from species with multiple inner ear redundancy organs, barely register a flicker in Nana's movement pattern. She crossed it with the calm, unbothered gait of a woman who had spent decades managing a shop's backstairs while balancing stacked boxes of fabric on her hip, one hand always free for whatever crisis needed handling next: a crying customer, a delivery dispute, a child who'd wandered off. "This reminds me of the shop," she commented as she floated past a disoriented safety drone that had been stationed to assist disoriented test subjects. Things floating everywhere when the shelf collapsed in '94. I held that whole rack up with one arm, while I called for help with the other. This is easier. At least nothing here smells like burnt incense. The magnetic floor panels reverse polarity at random intervals, designed to throw off even the most balance-adapted species. Nana adjusted her gait without seeming to notice the changes were happening. Her decades of careful, deliberate movement, born from genuinely needing to protect a bad knee for years, translating into an almost supernatural sense of balance and weight distribution. "I've been falling-proofing my walk since 2003, she said, not even looking down. You learn to feel the floor instead of looking at it. Comes from icy sidewalks in winter, mostly, and also the year my son-in-law waxed the kitchen floor too much before Diwali, and nobody told me." The electroshock pit, which had given even Maya a brief moment of genuine caution on her first run, Nana crossed without the slightest hesitation, her steps placed with the kind, precise, unhurried confidence of someone navigating a crowded kitchen during a major holiday dinner preparation, where one wrong step meant a dropped tray, a burned hand, or worse, ruining the rice. She cleared the entire course: zero gravity, reversing magnetics, shock pit, and a chaotic randomly generated corridor finale in 11 seconds. For seconds faster than Maya's best time. In the observation chamber, an entire row of council delegates had gone completely silent, which, for several species present, was a deeply unnatural and alarming state. "She is older than the first specimen," said the Valkyrie delegate, voice flat with disbelief. "She claims to have reduced physical capacity, and she has somehow outperformed the younger specimen on every single physical metric." "Perhaps," Threll said slowly, almost to himself, physical capacity was never the variable we should have been measuring. He was beginning, with creeping dread, to understand something the rest of the galaxy had never had reason to consider: that an entire lifetime of ordinary, unglamorous human struggle, raising children without modern conveniences, surviving displacement and poverty, working physically demanding jobs for decades, navigating decades of small daily crises that never made headlines and never earned medals, had quietly forged something far more dangerous than any deliberate military training program could have produced. "Bring her to the puzzle trials," Threll said. "I need to understand the scope of what we're dealing with." The puzzle battery had also been adjusted after Maya's run, an additional 6 challenges added at the highest tier difficulty, designed by the Council's leading Valkyrie theorists specifically to be unsolvable within any reasonable time frame by a non-Valkyrie mind. Nana looked at the tablet. They handed her with mild confusion. "This is like the puzzles in the newspaper," she said. "The Sunday ones. I do those every week with my coffee before anyone else in the house is awake, although the newspaper puzzles don't usually glow." She picked through the first several challenges with brisk, almost dismissive efficiency, occasionally muttering commentary that nobody quite understood, but everyone found deeply unsettling. "This one is like budgeting for a wedding," she said, solving a resource allocation puzzle that had taken Soren the Archivist nearly 20 minutes in under 90 seconds. "Everyone wants their favorite dish. Nobody wants to pay for it. And somehow you still have to make 16 tables of food work with a budget for 12. You learn to see all the numbers at once, or the whole thing falls apart, and your daughter cries at her own wedding." The most difficult challenge in the entire battery, the 16-variable temporal-spatial reasoning problem, the Valkyrie themselves had never fully solved in formal testing, included specifically as a theoretical ceiling test. Took Nana 4 minutes and 12 seconds. She solved it while simultaneously asking Aksa, conversationally, whether the facility had a kitchen she could use, because she didn't trust that anyone here knew how to make a proper cup of tea, and she wanted to show them as a gesture of goodwill between civilizations. Thorell stared at the completed puzzle results, then at the small, white-haired woman calmly waiting for an answer about kitchen access, and felt the full, dizzying weight of what his species had just learned about humanity settle into his chest like a physical object. "There is no upper limit," he said quietly. "We assumed a species' baseline citizen represented something close to their ceiling. We never accounted for a species whose ordinary lives were this relentless, this adaptive, this unbreakable." "Sir," Oxa said, voice trembling slightly, "she's asking about the kitchen again." "Give her the kitchen," Thorell said. "Give her anything she wants. I have a feeling that refusing this woman tea is the single most dangerous decision I could make today." He had no idea how right he was about to be proven, because the combat simulation hadn't happened yet, and Unit 7's replacement unit was about to learn exactly what decades of holiday retail shifts could teach a person about handling aggressive, unreasonable opponents. What happens when you put the galaxy's most advanced combat AI against a woman who once talked an armed robber into leaving politely over a cup of tea? The engineers were about to find out, and they would not enjoy the answer. After Nana's tea, which, against every protocol in Valkyrie facility regulations, had been brewed in the staff break room using ingredients she'd requested be synthesized to her exact specifications, and which Thorell privately admitted was the best thing he had ever tasted in 4 decades of diplomatic service, the Council reluctantly proceeded to the combat evaluation. Unit 7 had been taken offline for repairs, and what its engineers diplomatically called tactical recalibration, following its humiliating defeat against Maya. In its place stood Unit 9, a newer model specifically upgraded with adaptive learning protocols that incorporated Maya's fighting data, designed to counter the exact movement patterns and reflexes she displayed. Nobody had thought to design a counter for what Nana was about to bring to the arena, because nobody on the Council had any conceptual framework for what they were facing. "This is the robot that fights?" Nana asked, eyeing Unit 9's gleaming chassis with the same skeptical once-over. She gave the suspiciously cheap produce at the market. "It looks expensive. Probably breaks down a lot, like everything expensive. Unit 9 has analyzed extensive combat data and adapted accordingly," Oxa explained. "It should not be underestimated." Nana said, unconvinced, rolling up her cardigan sleeves with the unhurried deliberateness of someone preparing to deal with an unreasonable customer. "I have dealt with worse than robots. I once dealt with my neighbor's son-in-law at a wedding after he insulted my biryani in front of 40 guests. This will be easier." Unit 9 opened with a calculated feint, designed specifically to bait an aggressive overcommitment based on Maya's data patterns. Nana didn't overcommit. She didn't move much at all. Actually, she simply shifted her weight a few inches, let the feint sail past her, and gave the machine a look that, despite having no facial expression to read it with, somehow made several council members in the observation room feel like they personally needed to apologize for something. "Is that all?" she asked. "I have stirred bigger pots than you." Unit 9 escalated. Grappling sequences. Multi-limb coordinated strikes. An adaptive learning subroutine that recalculated its approach in real time based on every motion Nana made. The problem, which the engineers would spend weeks afterward trying to understand, was that Nana's movements weren't built on combat logic at all. They were built on 40 years of crowd control during holiday retail seasons, decades of carrying unbalanced loads up narrow stairs without dropping anything, years of physically wrangling unruly children, unreliable furniture, and the occasional overly affectionate but very large family dog, and a lifetime of simply never, ever giving an inch when she'd already decided something wasn't going to happen. Unit 9's adaptive AI had nothing to adapt to. There was no pattern, because Nana's movements weren't patterns. They were the accumulated, bone-deep instincts of someone who had spent her entire life making instant decisions about exactly how much force a situation required and never wasting effort on anything more. When Unit 9 attempted a grappling hold calibrated to neutralize even augmented combatants, Nana redirected it with what looked, to the horrified engineering team, exactly like the motion of swatting a misbehaving grandchild's hand away from a hot stove. Quick, unthinking, absolute. The machine's arm locked, then buckled, then powered down entirely as an internal safety protocol interpreted the joint stress as catastrophic structural failure. "You held that wrong," Nana told the now motionless machine, not unkindly. You should keep your elbow in. My grandson does the same thing when he tries to carry too many boxes at once. I tell him every time, and every time he doesn't listen, just like you. Final result. Unit 9, 0 wins, 1 structural failure, and according to its own diagnostic log, later studied by deeply confused engineers, a permanently altered set of combat priority weightings that the AI itself flagged in its own self-assessment notes as having been corrected by external input of unknown but apparently superior origin. In the observation room, the silence had become something almost sacred. She broke it, Oxa whispered. She didn't even seem to try, and she broke our newest combat unit. Threll didn't answer immediately. He was staring at the readouts, the puzzle results, the reflex data, the obstacle course times, an entire database now utterly dwarfing every comparable record from every other species the Council had ever evaluated, set not by an elite specimen, not by a soldier or a scientist, but by an unmodified barista and her unmodified, arthritic, tea-obsessed grandmother. Administrator, said the Valkyrie delegate quietly, I believe we need to convene an emergency session. I believe, Threll said, we need to convene several. The emergency session that followed lasted 11 hours, conducted in increasingly panicked tones across translation devices struggling to keep pace with the sheer volume of alarmed cross-species commentary. Every metric they'd used to evaluate thousands of species across centuries had just been rendered in a single week, almost meaningless against a baseline that didn't appear to have an actual ceiling. If this is average, argued one delegate from a heavily armored species known for valuing strength above all else, then they're elite specimens, they're actual soldiers, they're actual scientists, they're actual exceptional citizens. What could they possibly be capable of? We sent for an ordinary human specifically to establish a low baseline. We did not get a low baseline, Threll said, his voice flat with exhausted resignation. We got 2 completely unenhanced civilians who, between making coffee and managing a household, have apparently quietly developed reflexes, problem-solving ability, and physical resilience that exceeds nearly every specialized specimen in galactic history. And the grandmother insists this is typical for humans her age. What do we do? Oxa asked, her 4 eyes wide with something approaching genuine existential dread. Threll thought for a long moment, watching the looping footage of Nana Patel calmly correcting a combat robot's elbow positioning before sipping tea she brewed herself in an alien facility's break room. We do, he said slowly, the only sensible thing left to do. What he proposed next would become, within a matter of weeks, the single most consequential diplomatic policy shift in the recorded history of the Galactic Council, and had absolutely nothing to do with weapons, fleets, or strategic alliances. What's the single smartest thing an entire galaxy of advanced civilizations could decide to do after meeting one coffee shop barista and her tea-loving grandmother? According to the Galactic Council, the answer was simple: be very, very polite. Threll stood before the full assembly, the gathered delegates from every species in the Council's jurisdiction, and presented findings that no civilization had ever needed to deliver before. We requested an average human specimen for baseline testing, he began. We received Maya Patel, a barista with no military background, who broke every reflex, agility, and combat record in our database within a single afternoon, treating each evaluation as recreational entertainment. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Believing this to be an anomaly, we requested a control specimen of presumed lesser capability. Threll continued. Earth sent us Nirmala Patel, Maya's 71-year-old grandmother, who suffers from arthritis and claims to be slowed down by age. She subsequently broke every record her granddaughter had just set, defeated our most advanced combat AI so thoroughly that the unit required a full diagnostic recalibration, solved a puzzle battery our own scholars consider near the edge of solvability, and brewed, in our facility's break room, what several staff members have independently described as the finest cup of tea they have ever consumed. He let that settle for a moment. Neither of these women possess any cybernetic enhancement, genetic modification, or specialized training. Both insist they are unremarkable members of their species. Earth's government has confirmed this assessment, stating in their official communication, and I quote directly, "Yeah, that sounds about right. Grandmas are kind of terrifying. You should see what happens at family dinners." The chamber erupted into the kind of chaotic, overlapping discussion that translation devices were never designed to handle gracefully. "What does this mean for their exceptional citizens?" demanded the armored delegate from earlier, his voice tight with barely contained alarm. "Their actual soldiers? Their scientists? Their elite athletes, if such categories even properly apply to a species this universally formidable?" "We do not know," Threll admitted, "and I would respectfully suggest that we never find out through direct confrontation." He outlined his proposal carefully, methodically, watching the room slowly come around to the only conclusion that made any rational sense given the data in front of them. Humanity, the Council concluded, was not a species that had developed extraordinary individuals through deliberate cultivation, military investment, or genetic engineering, the way most spacefaring civilizations historically had. Instead, an entire planet of ordinary people had been unknowingly forging extraordinary capability through nothing more than a relentless, everyday grind of survival, raising families without modern conveniences, working physically and mentally demanding jobs for decades on end, surviving economic hardship, displacement loss, and 1,000 small daily crises that never made it into any history book. Managing a chaotic cafe during a holiday rush, running a household through war and poverty and constant uncertainty, learning to read a room, calm a stranger, fix a problem with no resources and no time, over and over and over again for an entire lifetime, without ever once considering any of it remarkable. What terrified the Council most wasn't Maya's reflexes, or Nana's puzzle solving, or even the broken combat AI gathering dust in a maintenance bay. It was the implication, confirmed and reconfirmed by both women with genuine, baffled sincerity, that they were not exceptional, that this was simply what an average human looked like, once you accounted for the unglamorous, unrecognized toughness baked into the species by its own difficult, unglorified daily existence. The final Council resolution passed with a near-unanimous vote, a level of unity the Assembly had not achieved on any prior issue in recorded history. Resolution 7734 Omega, as it would come to be formally known across galactic diplomatic archives, established the following. First, all future first contact evaluations of humanity were permanently suspended. No further combat, reflex, or cognitive testing would be conducted on any human specimen, regardless of age, occupation, or apparent physical condition, under any circumstances. Second, all diplomatic communications with Earth would proceed under a standing policy of, in Threll's own carefully chosen wording, maximum courtesy and minimum provocation. Third, and this clause, leaked later to several amused human news outlets, became something of a galactic meme. Any human grandmother encountered during future diplomatic exchanges was to be treated with the highest possible honors available under Council protocol, offered tea immediately upon arrival, and under no circumstances challenged to any form of competitive activity, physical or intellectual, regardless of how casually or confidently she may suggest it herself. Maya and Nana were returned to Earth shortly afterward, each presented with a small ceremonial token of the Council's deepest respect and ongoing gratitude for their patience during the evaluation process, which Nana later used as a particularly heavy and effective paperweight, and which Maya kept on account of the grind, where regulars occasionally asked about it and were told with a shrug, "Oh, that's from this job interview that didn't really go anywhere." Long story. Back on the Council's homeworld, Administrator Threll found himself, against all expectation, promoted for his handling of the situation. His superiors praised his decisive crisis management and forward-thinking diplomatic strategy, which mostly amounted to recognizing, faster than anyone else, exactly when to stop testing and start being polite. He kept, framed on his office wall, a single still image from the security footage. Nirmala Patel, sipping tea she brewed herself, casually correcting a combat robot's elbow positioning while 4 different alien species watched in mute collective terror. Beneath it, he'd had a small plaque engraved with words that would eventually become an informal motto across multiple diplomatic corps throughout the galaxy. Never underestimate an average human, especially their grandmothers. And somewhere on Earth, completely unaware of the policy shift she'd single-handedly caused, Nana Patel was already telling the story to her bridge club, embellishing it slightly with each retelling, while Maya steamed oat milk for Gary's order and wondered, not for first time, whether she should put in a galactic test subject on her resume. She decided against it. It probably wouldn't even be the most interesting thing on there, next to excellent multitasking and customer service excellence.